Is there intelligent alien life? And if so, has the government been covering it up?
What's going on, everyone? Tonight, we are again stepping away a little bit from the New Jersey drones situation. I know that's kind of a hot topic, but there was another thing that I think is kind of falling under the weeds right now, which is the UFO sighting, essentially from Oregon. This happened around the Eugene area, and I don't know. Like we just watched the video backstage, and it's alarming to say the least. So I'm gonna pull this up right now. We're gonna listen to it, and then I'll kind of let Steezo, give us kind of the details on it. He's got his pilot license and kind of just understands a little bit more about the aerospace world, or just
aviation.
Aviation, yeah, that's probably a better way to put it. So let's go ahead and play this.
Is there any military activity out straight ahead of us?
No, we're not seeing anything. I had another one report at like 30,000 feet in the Eugene area. We're not sure what it is.
Yeah, there's lots moving out there.
1596, yeah, they're looking into it.
We're seeing 3 or 4 targets. They're all altitudes, up and down. It's pretty crazy. There was some at 30 probably. But, I mean, they're shooting way up. We say maybe up to the 50s, it looks like. Is there traffic actually out about our 2 to 3 o'clock, about, 20, 30 miles?
No, it's got the 4 different lights going up and down. I'm getting a few reports, but you're seeing it right in front of you now too as well?
It's 2 to 3 o'clock off, that 2 to 3 o'clock from our position. Looks about 20 miles going in circles.
Medevac 1 Lima Foxtrot. Yeah, we're not seeing anything. Getting lots of different reports out there. Some at 30, some all the way up to 50,000. About 3 or 4 different lights. Does it look like they're around your altitude now?
No, there's one way up high and one about my altitude. Moving in like a circle, like a corkscrew pattern. All right, I'm visually have eyes on what looks like an aircraft strobe that's at my 2 o'clock and 22 miles at my altitude. I'm actually showing him on TCAS. Do you see that one?
Medevac 1 Lima Foxtrot. I do not.
He looks like he's moving towards, it looks like it's moving towards the north. Like I said, 22 and a half miles off my right wing. Just had another one show up about my 1 o'clock, about 1,000 feet high, zipping towards us and then back out towards the ocean. It's red in color, moving at extreme speeds. I don't even know how to describe how fast he's moving. 661 on the Fox.
Medical Name Foxtrot, Roger. You are cleared to maneuver as necessary, left and right, to avoid the UFO out there.
It's weird. It's a red circular shape, and it keeps zipping out towards the ocean and then coming back in about 20 miles or closer to us, and then it zips back out of the ocean and we can't see it.
That's crazy, man.
It's so wild. So before we kind of give our opinions, Steezo, why don't you walk us through what's going on with this? We kind of drew up a little diagram, a visual for you guys to kind of.
Yeah. So basically, this is our this is our rough draft, but rather than flood the eyes and hurt people's eyes with with a flight radar, which has a bunch of mess all over and confuse everybody, what I was able to extrapolate from an even larger voice contact between air traffic control and the different planes was I was able to triangulate the pass and figure out which planes were headed. So the first one that you have marked in the red, it was a UAL flight, United Airlines flight. I don't know where it originated from, but it was heading to Eugene. That's the first contact where they were asking if there's any military activity out there because they're seeing some strange lights.
So it was passing through Bend, right? And
over
then
over the Cascades, right? He's flying over the Cascades on approach to Eugene. And after he's basically over the Cascades, he's seeing these lights way out. And then he radios, he's the first contact to radio into air traffic control. They don't have any information on any military flight showing up on their radar, which if if there's a military flight going on, even if they're flying over in domestic airspace, they have to use their transponders. It's the law. If they're on a military covert mission, they still have to do it until they get off into international airspace, essentially, right? Because of traffic.
Okay. And I think the one thing that we should point out is that the towers are not seeing these lights.
Correct.
The pilots are seeing these things visually and on their equipment, but the tower never once
Correct.
sees any of these lights.
So what it didn't say in this video is that air traffic control is ATC. It said it in the beginning. ATC for this whole big area is actually ATC Seattle. So there's around the country, there's giant radars that will cover airspaces. So this actual airspace right here is, and it goes all the way down to, I want to say, like Southern Oregon, is covered by Seattle, ATC Seattle. So that's who they're actually talking to, is actually air traffic control in Seattle. So they have big radar dishes that are covering this whole area until when you go into land at an airport, just before you're talking to the whatever air traffic control, then they pass you off to the tower which is approach control, AC approach control. They'll tell you what runways to go ahead and land on within a few minutes before you actually come in and land and all that stuff. But anyways, first flight, passenger plane, United Airlines coming into Eugene, makes the original contact to air traffic control in Seattle. Seattle says they don't have anything on their radar. They say we got something on our radar, but it's on our TCAS, which is our air avoidance system. For every plane that size has to have one. It basically is a second safeguard if they lose contact with air traffic control for whatever reason. They're still able to pull up radar and stuff like that so they can avoid collisions in the air. And then it's seeing is basically he says is that he's seeing seeing those lights going from their elevation, which is 30 something thousand feet, all the way up to 50,000 feet, going up and down or in a corkscrew pattern. And then the second plane that comes in is the one you want to go back to that map real quick, is in the blue you got there. That's a medevac plane. I think it's a Pilatus, if I remember right, is the name of the plane. And it's coming on an emergency call to pick up a patient in Newport, Oregon, to take them back to Oregon, probably for cardiac surgery or whatever, because it's a trauma one center in Portland. And it's on its way, and it radios into air traffic control to ask if it has any sort of like contacts out there. And it's seeing a light that's zipping back and forth between Eugene, the yellow line that you got between Eugene and Florence on the coast, which I think we figured out was about 85 miles as the crow flies. And so they're seeing multiple things. So you got two different pilots and from two different vantage points, pretty far away too. And that plane, that one in the blue, is only flying at an altitude about 14,000 feet. So it has a different angle on this UFO it's seeing, and it goes on for minutes. And eventually, like I said, there's another video that has more air traffic control, conversation, more specific. They basically got pictures and video of this thing from a distance, the red ball, the red light, or whatever. So that hasn't been published or put out to media or to the public yet that I'm aware of. But yeah, there was multiple sightings of this, and then and it went on for a little while too. It wasn't just like a quick thing, because later on too, and another, like I said, they ended up talking to a Coast Guard helicopter that was flying really close to where this UFO was being seen, but it was only like 200 feet in the air. They said they didn't see anything except for a shooting star, but it could be because this object was probably at their 12 o'clock high, and they probably couldn't see it, and they could have been in a marine layer too, because they're flying right along the coast. So they didn't see anything. But further on also too, as more planes were coming into Eugene approach control, they kept on warning, like basically telling these planes, hey, you guys see anything crazy, let us know. There's been UFO sightings. So all these pilots that were coming into Eugene, like, really? That's cool. So it gets pretty nerdy and stuff there. But I thought the fact that the pilots from pretty far away, we're talking hundreds of miles away, at different elevations, we're seeing basically the same type of thing, same lights and stuff.
Coming from different directions too.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it only further solidifies the fact that it's becoming more and more undeniable, and
Right.
the whole idea of oceans and UFOs is starting to really, I think, make a real stance in this topic. USOs. We've heard a lot about this type of stuff, and I know they tried to kind of connect the thing with the New Jersey drones, but they're coming from the ocean, from a mothership, quotations, because I really wasn't buying that from the start. But this one specifically interests me because I think it's completely isolated from that event, right? And
Yeah.
it's kind of getting tossed under the rug. Like you're not really hearing much about this unless you're really invested, like we are in this topic. And this one's harder to prove, but I would say that conversation alone of that recording that we heard is pretty telling to what's happening.
Well, you would think also the pilots understand what they're looking at. You don't hear anything about regulation, navigation lights. You don't hear anything like that. They're clearly, whatever they're seeing, they're not familiar with.
There's a
They're
red sphere.
they're flying at insane speeds, jumping altitude from 30 to 50,000 all over the place, corkscrew patterns. Like, it's just not anything. To me, in my opinion, it something like this and the New Jersey drone situation they're two completely different things.
Right.
Yeah.
But
Which is why I wanted to bring up it's an isolated event that I think is not getting the correct amount of validation at this time, because there's something else going on. And I thought this was an important one to kind of bring up based off the fact that,
it's really important.
yeah, I mean, if you follow this stuff, like, this one's pretty big. And it's nice kind of having everything visually set out for us. I was having a difficult time kind of breaking it down in my head. Like, basically the extent that I had was, these pilots were seeing stuff, which is what we've gotten before. But it's kind of nice having, Stezo, you here to kind of lay it out as to what, the directions, these different, at least broken down to a certain degree.
Yeah. It puts more when you can look at a map. Okay, and then you can like figure it out. When people say they see lights in the sky, it's different than you see in lights. And then when you're talking about two professional pilots that see stuff all the time, and they know it when they don't know it's an aircraft, or they see something like a shooting star, or they're just used to know what they see all the time, right? And if they see an anomaly, and then they're simultaneously having the same experience, but they're hundreds of miles away, and they're looking in the same direction.
Yeah.
That to me is very compelling. It's not a one deal. One pilot saw it. It was two different groups of pilots that saw it from hundreds of miles away, but point in the same direction. If you triangulate it, you can surmise that they're looking at the same thing.
Well,
I think it's really interesting also that, like we said, that the towers weren't picking them up, but the planes
it wasn't.
were.
That's what. So they kept on doing. They said we weren't pinging. They weren't hitting anything. And the thing that later on, like it's another video, and it ended up being like a nothing burger, but they contact that, like I said, that Coast Guard helicopter, it's literally right. It must be zipping right in their neighborhood, like right in front of their face. That's why they were trying to get a hold of it. But it was flying on the ocean top because it was on a search and rescue mission, and looking at the ocean and shit, not looking up, right? So it didn't see anything.
And also that runs parallel with other stories that we've looked into, like the one situation in Turkey, I believe it was, with the jellyfish UFO. Like, it's not showing up on thermals or radar, so that kind of plays a role too.
Mhm.
And I just want to reiterate that this is another classic example of like the undeniability that there is when it comes to this stuff, and people love to kind of pass it off. And I'm just going to keep hitting it home right now, because we live in a time where it's getting harder and harder to cover this stuff up.
But dude, there's a big difference between some random person on the street with a cell phone seeing something and trained pilots that have spent years in the sky and know exactly what they're looking at, seeing these things that they cannot explain.
And to your point, Chris, it makes me think How many times has this happened in the past 5 years, let's say, right? Like, how many times has this happened where pilots, like, obviously you don't hear what the pilots are saying, right? To the control towers. How many times has this happened where you're just on a flight to wherever, right? Vacation, flying home for holidays, that type of situation, and little do you know that like a bunch of UFOs were just flying by them,
Right,
you know?
right. And who's
It
going
does.
to know better than the people that spend
Yeah,
hours and
yeah,
hours and hours in the sky?
yeah.
You know,
So any last thoughts, gentlemen, before I wrap this up?
no, it's just an interesting case, man, and I'm glad we could cover it and bring some light to it because it's one of those more it's it's more important, you know.
For sure, for sure. Steez, are you?
Yeah, I'm actually excited to the fact that apparently there was video and pictures taken. I want to see it. I think it'll eventually be released because they're not going to. I mean, it was on the audio multiple times where they were sending it, and then even a couple of the pilots that were incoming later on asked if they could get, and they said, "Yeah, I'll give you my number or whatever, and I'll send them to you when I get the pictures." So I'm sure eventually it might already be out, like some of it now, but I'd be interested to see some of that footage. So we should keep an eye out for that too. And if it pops up, we
Yeah,
should definitely, do that. But yeah, no, this is like you said, this is typical. This has been going on for decades where pilots have seen stuff. Not just military pilots. That's the big thing right now is our military seeing a lot of these things, but commercial pilots have been seeing them for a long time too. It just doesn't really get in the news or not
yeah,
because there was a time not in the far past where if commercial pilots couldn't say anything because people would think you're nuts and they're afraid to lose their jobs.
All right,
And
yeah,
so it was a stigma to it, just like any profession, really. But yeah, so they didn't say anything, and but this is a typical I guess an encounter at that elevation. I mean, that must
right.
be
And
kind
not
of
only
life changing and stuff like that. So yeah, I'd be interested to see. Hopefully, we'll even get more things that pop up. Now that this one came out, uh, maybe we'll get some more of these. Maybe they're more common than we
well,
led to believe.
yeah,
sorry, Chris, did you have something to
I,
wrap up?
I was just going to add to what Stezo was saying with these people, the pilots seeing the things. These red orbs, they weren't necessarily trying to hide. It's not like they weren't, trying to not, they weren't trying to hide. You know what I mean? They were being pretty
Yeah,
blatant. It seemed like.
yeah. Well, I not to leave it on a negative note, but I would say hold your breath, fellas, because we've gotten nothing but hiding of information.
Yeah.
you know.
Right?
um. So again, as always, thank you, gentlemen, for showing up tonight and
Yep.
recording this video with me. And for those of you who are watching, I appreciate you, and I will see you guys on the next video.
Later.
Later.
Later.